Good morning, Chairman Cummings, Ranking Member Jordan, and distinguished members of this committee. When I was asked to testify today, I frankly didn't know where to begin after our visit to the border. Much has been made about the fact that we have said that this is a manufactured crisis. And in many ways, it is manufactured in that it is wholly unnecessary. It is unnecessary to separate children from their families. It is unnecessary to have a policy to detain innocent women and families that have harmed no person and are legally seeking asylum in the United States of America. It is unnecessary to have a policy that calls children unaccompanied when they arrive with older brothers, sisters, and grandparents and treat them no differently than human traffickers. And in speaking of trafficking, it is completely unnecessary for this administration to choose to implement policies like metering and so-called remain in Mexico policies that dump innocent people in dangerous territories that puts them right in the crosshairs of human traffickers, ripe for picking. This is a manufactured crisis because the cruelty is manufactured. This is a manufactured crisis because there is no need for us to do this. There's no need for us to overcrowd and to detain and under-resource. There is no need for us to arrest innocent people and treat them no differently than criminals when they are pursuing their basic human rights. Much has been made about CBP agents in this hearing as well, and this is not their fault. And in some respects, in many respects, I agree, because it is a policy of dehumanization implemented by this executive administration, laid at the feet of Stephen Miller, that create a tinderbox of violence and dehumanization where hurt people hurt people. I would like to seek unanimous consent to submit the records of the names of 17 women I met during my trip to the border. I think one of the reasons, and what has been spoken of, is that there's two different universes, and it feels like we're speaking in two different worlds. And one of the reasons for that, I believe, is because when we took our tour of the border, one of the first things that we were told was that we were not allowed to speak to the migrants, that we were not allowed to have contact with them, that we shouldn't. And this was given for reasons of, quote, their safety or for the expediency of the tour. And after we entered and after we were asked to surrender our cell phones at the beginning of the tour, we went in, and one of the CBP officers, after that morning, it being revealed by ProPublica, which I would also seek unanimous consent to submit to the record. While it was revealed by ProPublica, a secret Facebook group where CBP members were planning to harm or encouraging harm of myself and Congresswoman Escobar, as well as mocking the deaths of migrant children. Into that environment, we walked into this facility. We were asked to surrender our phones and be guarded by the people without a guarantee that no one there was in that Facebook group. We went in, and one of the officers attempted to sneak a photograph of myself and other congressional members. And at that point, we asked to enter one of the cells. We were allowed to speak to the women, and these are the women that we spoke to. It's their handwriting. And while we are being asked to speak only to officers, we are not getting the accounts of migrants, of their treatment, of what they are experiencing. And so when these women tell me that they were put into a cell and that their sink was not working, and we tested the sink ourselves, and the sink was not working, and they were told to drink out of a toilet bowl, I believed them. I believed these women. I believed the canker sores that I saw in their mouths because they were only allowed to be fed unnutritious food. I believed them when they said they were sleeping on concrete floors for 2 months. I believed them. And what was worse about this, Mr. Chairman, was the fact that there were American flags hanging all over these facilities, that children were being separated from their parents in front of an American flag, that women We're being called these names under an American flag. We cannot allow for this.
Miss, since I interrupted you, I'll give you 30. I'm sorry. We'll give you a minute to wrap it up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I know my time was wrapping up at that time, so and again, we have to make sure that, and over again, when we spoke to these folks, whether it was agents, whether it was HHS officials, oftentimes they said the thing that we need most is not resources, we need policy change. So we need to change our metering policies. We need to change our detention policies. We need to change our policies on who we call unaccompanied. And that is one of the key areas, in addition to changing our policy on foreign affairs, on investment, on being an equal partner in Latin America and the Western Hemisphere. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
After several weeks of delay, this weekend, starting tomorrow, the Trump administration is planning to do something that it ran on back in 2016, enforcing the immigration laws of this country. ICE is expected to launch raids in several American sanctuary cities. It'll be seeking people who've received final orders of removal from this country, from a court. According to the president, most of these people have already been convicted of other more serious crimes.
It's not something I like doing, but people have come into our country illegally. We're focused on criminals. We're focused on, if you look at MS-13, but when people come into our country, we take those people out, and we take them out very legally. They all have papers, and it's a process, and I have an obligation to do it.
Now, the Democratic Party has been committed to keeping the borders open for, well, really all of Donald Trump's presidency so far, but they usually hide their intentions at least a little bit. They'll say that people deserve their day in court first, or they'll argue that only criminals ought to be deported. But this case is unambiguous. Every person being targeted by ICE starting this weekend has already received a final order for removal. In other words, they've had their day in court. They're not being held in ICE facilities at the border. Many of them have criminal convictions. At this point, it's a simple matter of enforcing America's laws. Bill Clinton did it, Barack Obama did it, but that was before. So these Democrats have made their decision. American laws do not matter. Nobody should be deported ever.
These massive raids and internal enforcement operations that are going to separate potentially thousands of families, many of whom have committed no crime against this country, pose no threat to the United States of America.
I'd hope that we can come together as a party and stand up against what should be seen, I think, universally as a cruel regime.
Innocent people who may be swept up and arrested in massive raids across the country.
If rumors start going on about raids, let alone if it starts actually happening, it immediately makes the community less safe.
We could be using these law enforcement resources to really go after the folks that are a real threat to our communities. This is all kinds of wrong, and we're a better country than this.
Families belong together. Every person in America has rights.
And so he's going to create, as he often does, this distraction. I agree with you. And do these raids, which is a crime against humanity.
Telling people who've been told by a court, by a judge, that they must legally leave the country, enforcing that as a crime against humanity. This is Kamala Harris. Hillary Clinton, meanwhile, piped up from retirement or whatever she's doing these days. The same woman who claims that Russian Facebook trolls are a threat to democracy decided to actively assist smuggling people into this country. She posted a guide to evading ICE on Twitter and added, "Por favor, comparte." That's please share in Spanish. In the state of California, meanwhile, Governor Gavin Newsom has released an instructional video informing his state's criminals on how they can avoid law enforcement. Watch.
I just want to say to folks that are anxious about a knock on the door, when we talk about knowing your rights, no abras la puerta. And without a warrant, you don't have to open the door. Without a warrant, you do not have to open the door.
So picture a Republican governor making a video used with taxpayer money, telling voters how to, cheat on their taxes or how to buy illegal guns. What would the reaction be? Well, CNN, of course, would call for him to be imprisoned, but it wouldn't because they care about the law, obviously. The Republicans do. On the left, A new reality is now explicit. Our laws and our Constitution are only valid if they're in accord with current Democratic Party talking points. Otherwise, you can ignore them. Buck Sexton is the host of the Buck Sexton Show, and he joins us tonight. So, Buck, I mean, you hate to be continuously outraged over the same story, but every week it seems to get crazier and crazier, and now we have lawmakers calling enforcement of the law a crime against humanity. Where does this end?
There's a momentum to the insanity at this point, Tucker. It's quite clear that they're engaged in mass nullification of immigration law. That is what is happening now. At any stage of the process, whether it's in sanctuary cities, we're talking about enforcement for people with final deportation orders. And this was all part of the con. Initially, there were no caravans, and there was not going to be any problem, no crisis at the border. And then it was, okay, there's a lot of people at the border, but we just have to let people go through their process. And if they don't get to stay after that, we promise we'll be okay with them being sent home. And now we know that that was a lie all along, too. They keep telling lies about this, and they're honestly running out of room at this point. And that's what we're facing nullification. And by the way, when you put up those lists, they're getting very close to violating another statute over immigration. I'm sure they wouldn't care, which is aiding and abetting. You can't actually harbor illegal immigrants. You can't actually employ illegal immigrants. There are all kinds of laws out there. And some of these Democrats seem to think that they should do whatever they can to obstruct law enforcement efforts. They want to talk about danger to the public. This is dangerous.
It's crazy. But it's also unfair on one level. I mean, so they're telling foreign nationals they don't have to abide by American law. They can ignore our laws. But they're telling me that I have to follow every American law, and if I step outside the bounds of those laws, I go to jail. So, like, why am I paying my taxes? Sincerely, why can't I buy a silencer? Why am I paying attention to all these laws when they're telling residents of Guatemala and Honduras, like, they don't have to follow the law? I'm not kidding.
There's so much illegality that actually gets piled up when you look at the real statutes. It's a lie, it's against the law to lie to federal officers at the border about what you're fleeing. It's against the law to lie about your age. It's against the law to have a fake Social Security card. You go down the list. It's against the law to engage in document fraud. There is an entire subset of U.S. federal law that is being violated all the time with impunity, and people seem to think in the Democratic side they can just ignore all of this.
At some point, somebody's going to make a defense in court along those lines. Like, these people don't have to follow the law. Why should I? Well, and that's when things really will start to fall apart.
I wish the Democrats would just be honest about what they want. If no one should get deported, if nobody should have immigration law enforced against them, the people like AOC, the legislative body in charge of these laws, they should just say, we want to be open borders. Stop pretending that's not what they want. It so clearly is.
Right.